Alright, well, today is engine teardown day. Obviously I took this morning and got the chassis out of here. It's back down in the barn out of the way so Dad can have the shop back. Called the injection pump shop today. I'm gonna have to call them back tomorrow because all their techs were off today, and all I got was a shop manager. They're doing paperwork, so he said give him a call back tomorrow when everybody's there. And yeah, other than that, there's not a whole lot to talk about other than let's get after it. I'm gonna get the flywheel off first. Then we'll pull the rocker arm assembly and everything, get the head off. Actually, since I'm leaving the manifolds on, we'll probably pull the injection lines first. Get those out the way. And then we can take the head off and pull the timing train apart, get that off. Should be able to, after that, flip it over, pull the pan, and start pulling guts. Teeter, what are you chewing on? A piece of corn leaf. Goofball. So, anyway, nothing to it but to do it. Okay, so that everything doesn't come springing a thinging out at me, this is actually a piece of the old input shaft out of the 3-speed of the 4150, because I had to replace it because the clutch drum was all laid up. So we lobbed a chunk off of it for a clutch alignment tool. Okay, now this guy's got to come on. And your flywheel bolts. Which I don't know if this thing's got enough ass to take these off or not. Oh yeah. Maybe not. Now, if this was a gas engine, this is the point where... Hold on a second. If this is a gas engine, this is the point where you'd go in and make some scratch marks so that you get the flywheel lined up right. But I thought this had been done already. Now, the diesel's not as important, but I mean, you should still do it. But on a diesel, most of your timing is going to be up front. So, yeah. I thought this one had been marked already. I could have swore. Oh, it is marked. They put a pinprick there and then a pinprick on that dowel pin to line it up for an alignment mark. So, yeah. Before you remove the flywheel, if it's not already done from the factory, put a mark on it so you know what you got going on. I'm going to pull that line. That flywheel, you want to be right up next to the thing so you don't end up wearing it. It's all got to come off anyway. I guess we're going to put this over here because we're leaking diesel. Well, how did they do that? Oh, there we got it. Okay, there's that. I should probably bring another skid up and start setting all this stuff on too. Alright, so there's the flywheel. And then, I guess since we're here, we can take the back plate off the engine. Or off the block. Oh, yeah. I say, those are 9/16. That's not a 9/16 socket. Okay, so I'm going to just loosely reassemble the clutch and pressure plate back on the flywheel so that all the bolts and everything stay where they belong. And I'm going to go get a pallet, set some of this stuff on so we can kind of keep the parts organized. I'm going to take that off real quick while I'm right here too. Oop, shit. And then when you get parts like this, these are spacers that go here to keep this thing back away from the head. And you want to make sure everything stays together. You put the bolts back in, you go get yourself a couple nuts. And you put nuts on the bolts and everything. That way the spacers and everything stay together. You don't lose any parts. So anyway, I'm going to go get a skid, get some stuff organized here so that we can keep parts kind of consolidated and we don't get shit strung all over the shop. And then we will start working on the head. Alright, so I got all carried away and I got basically this whole side of the motor stripped except for the oil cooler and the lift pump. So that's all laying there. I got the water pump off, all the hoses off, all the lines, everything that runs to the head except for the injector lines, which is what I'm going to do right now. So we'll set you right here. I'm trying to get you in there. You ought to be able to see there. And I'd be curious to check the old injectors, which I don't have anymore because I threw them out because they were junk. But because pencil injectors are not worth having rebuilt. You just throw them away and buy new ones. I think these were 90 bucks a piece, if I remember right, when I put these on. But I'd be curious to look at the old ones because the nuts on these are 14 millimeter. I'd just be curious to see if the original ones were not metric. What?
We'll get gas. 4 trucks almost out.
Okay. Hopefully I can take these off as an assembly, otherwise I'm gonna have to take the clamps apart, which I probably ought to get. The plastic inside the clamps is all deteriorated, and number 1 is supposed to be captured, and the ends of the clamps for number 1 clamps in are all broke off from age, so I'm probably going to end up disassembling them anyhow, but if I can get them off in one piece, that'd make life a little easier. And number 6 is still partway on there. See, the number 6 is supposed to be captured there, number 1 is supposed to be captured there, and the plastic's all busted away, so hopefully you can still get those new. That'd be nice. do some cleaning on them nuts so they spin by hand. Looks like I need to be finding a new injector line for number 6. Something... Actually, looks like the shutoff cable's been wearing into it right there. Well, looks like I'm going to have to definitely get a new number 6 injection line, which shouldn't be an issue. Should be able to get one of them off of a parts tractor. Because it should be... I'd have to look up the part numbers. I know for sure it'd be the same as in 1955, and I'm thinking they're the same as in 1855. Because the only thing that would change, the length and everything would be the same. The only thing that would change would be the ID. I don't know if the 1755 would be different since it's non-turboed or not, but like I say, I'd have to look up part numbers. But it shouldn't be that hard to find a used one that's not got a hole partially wore in it. Now, you get that feed line off. I'm really curious to have him get this pump on a test bench and see where it's at. Because it's clearly been turned up because all the seals are broken off of it. And normally, even if it's been overhauled, the pump shop, for warranty purposes, would put their own seals on it so that they can warranty the pump. So I'm just curious to see where it's actually at because she's healthy. That's one thing it has never had a problem with is power. Even with a blown head gasket. Which, it's never actually blown into compression, which when you got multiple ways to blow a head gasket. You got blowing into compression, which means you broke a fryer ring and it's actually blowing exhaust gases into... Either it blew out the side of the gasket or it blew into the water jacket, which is usually occurs when, and then you end up blowing up your radiator because you overpressurize the cooling system, which is what happened to the 1955 when it blew its head gasket right after we got it, which that was due to shoddy workmanship. This one, it blew its first head gasket due to shoddy workmanship because when the same dealer that redid the 3-speed supposedly overhauled the engine, or not overhauled, supposedly put a head gasket in it and did some other maintenance work to it, and when they put the head gasket in it, they used blue Permatex for a head gasket sealer. I don't know if any of you guys know this, but anything silicone is not a head gasket sealer. And then they didn't torque the head bolts. We took all the head bolts loose with a 3/4 inch, or with a 1/2 inch ratchet, just a regular standard length. So, yeah, there's a reason it blew the first one. The second one blew because the black deck is... We thought it was the head deck, and then the head's been done, the head's been milled, so the head's flat, so now we pretty much confirmed it's the block deck. But, this one, every gasket that has blown back here. There's... I can't remember if there's 5 or 6 passages back here in the back of the head that are, for coolant flow and oil return out of the rocker arm gallery. And it blows in between a coolant passage and a oil return passage, and basically the only way it pressurizes the cooling system is it gets crankcase pressure. So it doesn't actually overpressure the cooling system per se. It's just the turbulence of the engine, or the turbulence of the air inside the crankcase pulses inside the cooling system and pushes coolant out the overflow is basically what this thing has been doing. So the block deck back here, I guarantee you that's where it blew again. The block deck back here in this back corner has probably got a low spot in it. So anyway, now I need to go get I got a 4x4 with holes drilled in it to arrange all the push rods. I'm going to go find that. It should be down in the barn. Then we can pull the rocker arm cover, pull the rocker arm assembly, pull the push rods, undo the head bolts, get the head off. Okay, now before you pull the rocker arm assembly, you got to pull the feed line off for the oil. And all this will kind of just get put back together loosely in the head, and we'll set the rocker arm cover back on it and keep everything together while it's sitting on the skid. And I'm going to take a couple 2x4s and make pads to bolt it down so that it doesn't hurt the injector tips, because you want it sitting off of whatever surface you got it sitting on. Now we pull the push rods. And this head is actually a completely different head than what belongs on the tractor. This was a looks like a October of '72 casting. So it's a 55 series head, but the head that was on it had some, I don't know if they had an injector tip fail and they had a cylinder running hot or what, but I can't remember what hole. I think it was 4 or 5 had a bunch of pitting in the head surface. And I picked this head up at a dealer going out of business thing. I got the head. It was a completely assembled head, had all the valves in it, the whole 9 yards, had both manifolds, had the turbo. Yeah, so it was either an 1855 or 1955 Hegs had a turbo. Duh. But I got the whole head and everything on it for $150. And it was a virgin head. It had never been machined, at least not from everything that that the machine shop measured, it had never been machined or anything. So I think I got a pretty good deal on it. So anyhow, now we can grab the big impact and bust all these head bolts loose. Now the fun part usually involves breaking this damn thing loose. So because there's really no good way to get a hold of the damn thing. And it's got dowels in it. If I remember right, there's one here and one here, or vice versa. There's 2 dowels that locate it, so you're fighting those, you're fighting the gasket and the whole 9 yards. So I'm gonna get this thing busted loose right quick. We really need to give our engine stand like a 2-inch lift kit, because I can't make it underneath with the legs on the cherry picker to get over center. Kind of sucks, but little bit of jacking, a little bit of blocking. We got her. I got it loose. It actually went a lot easier than I thought it would. There's pockets in the gasket right here on this side, in between the push rod holes, and I just took a gasket scraper and drove it in there because there's no gasket to fight you, and it was deep enough. I was able to hit the ramp on the stem of the scraper, and it popped the head. It actually went a lot easier than I thought. So anyhow, we'll set you right there for a second. Well, the gasket's not blown out in its normal spot, so that's kind of interesting. I'm curious to see where it actually went. Oh, well, I'm guessing right somewhere around there because number 2 is full of water. It's coming off in one piece for the most part, so it should be fairly easy to tell. Well, this is interesting, so I don't see anything. I don't see anything that's necessarily screaming, hey, this is a blown head gasket. Because normally it blows that guy right there or that guy right there. There's kind of an odd deformation in that firing right there. Well, normally if it was... Interesting. Unless I got a cracked sleeve. But I don't know how else water would have got into that guy. So all the other ones are nice and clean. I don't see any tracks in the head deck like it was blowing coolant past the head gasket or blowing exhaust gases past the head gasket. Normally if you're doing that, you'd get a track mark on the fire ring. Well, now I'm curious to knock the sleeves out and see what we find. I mean, there's no cracks in the block, which of all the 310 things, that's one thing that they are definitely not known for, is cracking blocks. They're known for windowing blocks, but not cracking them. So, interesting. Okay, so I got all the external stuff off of it except for the oil cooler. It's being stubborn. I got all the bolts out and it won't budge, so I got frustrated with it, decided I'm going to move on to the oil pan. So, anyway, got a whole lot of little baby bolts to run out, so put you right there maybe. She's pretty scuzzy in there. Although nothing too out of the ordinary, mostly just sludge deposits. Nothing out of the ordinary in the bottom of the pan other than just some nasties, it looks like. Most of the sludge is probably from the fact that it have water in it, so all in all, not too bad, I don't think. So we are good to pull the oil pump, and then we can slide the cam out. And then we could pull all the lifter. Actually, we'll pull the lifters last, because that way it's easier to get to them. We'll pull the back cover off real quick. That holds the rear main. I also don't think all these studs are in the right spot, because there's no real rhyme or reason to them. Like, why would you have one here and then a bolt here? It doesn't make a lick of sense. So we'll have to consult the manual and see if it tells us where them studs actually belong, because they got to come out anyway, because you can't have them in there when it goes to the machine shop. So guess I'll pull that timing cover off, or not the timing cover, pull the seal plate off real quick. Go from there. Okay, so we're gonna start dropping rods. Normally, before you do this, you would go through and mark the main cap, or the rod caps, and the rods and the main caps, and number them so that you put them back in the right spot. Well, apparently at some point somebody's had this engine tore down all the way because all the sleeves are numbered. Why in the earth you would tear an engine down far enough to knock the sleeves out of it and you'd reuse the old sleeves, I don't know. But and all the rods and main caps and everything have already been marked. You can see a 3 on that. You can see a 1 there. See a 2 there, kinda. So everything's marked, so I don't got to do any of that. So yeah, should be good to start opening up holes. It's gonna be slightly oily. Okay, so that one's not gonna cut the mustard. I'm gonna use the big guy. And this is what I meant when I said it's still got the 6-point rod bolts in it. Is these are the upgrade or the update on these. Turn these into 12-point hardened rod bolts. So these are junk as far as an overhaul is concerned. Ooh, there's interesting. There does not seem to be any bearing material left in that guy. Okay, so that's 6. And while we got 6 there, 1's in line, so we can take 1 down. I mean, there's no spalling or anything. The crank journals look perfect. At least these two do. They're nice and smooth. There's no discoloration. So now we back the crank up just a hair so that we can get our hands in there. Actually, tell you what, we're gonna let this do some of the work for us. And we're gonna use the crank to push the rods out part way. Stay there, Mr. Bearing Shell. Now we can do 2 and 4, and then we'll be able to do 2 and 5, and then we can do 3 and 4, and then hopefully we'll be able to get the crank out of the way and push the pistons out. Okay, so I just went to take number 5 out and looked at it. This doesn't even have factory rod bolts. Like, see, these don't have a, these are a flat head, and these have this pattern in it that I'm not even Lord knows what kind of bolts those are. Those could be some whatever willy-nilly they had on the shelf that day. When whoever worked on this motor. That probably should not have been working on this motor. That's neat. Okay, all the rods are loose, so now we can get the crank out. And it is very, 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 very important to keep the main caps lined up with the journals they belong with. Because when they line board the block, they assemble the main caps and torque them all down to spec, line bore the block, and then take it back apart, and assemble the engine. So the holes are bored to match. So you got to make sure you can't go start mixing matching main caps or rod caps or everything has to go back to the part that it was line bored with. That way you don't end up with a bore that's askew. So that's why it's important to number everything. And just to make sure that those are all numbered, I'm going to wipe the ends off real quick. I'm pretty sure I saw a number on all of them. I just want to make damn sure. Yeah, that one's got a 2. That one's got a 1. That one's got a 3. That one's got a 4. 5. 6. And 7. Okay, so they are all numbered, and these are all stamped 434, which must be the part number for the main cap, so you got to make sure that the numbers you're seeing are separate from that part number, but they got them all stamped in the lower section here, so now and these are doweled, so you gotta work a little bit to get the bastards out. Sometimes if you pull the bolt part way out and pinch them, it helps you get a little leverage on it. Or, nope, not gonna do it. You little bastard. And then the dowel pins also make it where you can't. The fuck was that? The dowel pins also make it where you can't reverse the caps and put them in backwards because the dowel pins are on one side, not in the center. Oops. That one's got some pitting in the bearing, but I don't see. Damn it. There ain't a dang thing wrong with the crank journal. Yeah, no, there's a little bit of a. What size bearing do we got? Cleveite. Usually, I don't know, looks like they're 20 under. So it looks, we'll have to pull them all, but it looks like at some point, because these are stamped 1977. So it would appear at some point the mains have been ground and the couple rods that I checked were standard. So that's a bummer. I was hoping it was a completely virgin crank, but should still be able to get 30 under mains. Okay, now we can get the lifters out right quick. We got a good board for that. And I need a magnet. This is the one that had the water in it.
Clean spot on the sleeve right there. I don't know if that's a sign something was going past it. Pretty much all the rest of them are rest of them are carbon all the way around.
All right, so we've kind of done an initial inspection of all the parts. The crank is rough, to say the least. All of the rod journals measure a worn standard dimension. We just went through real quick and we mic'd it, but I got to get the book out and figure out what the actual specs are. But it looks like the rod journals are going to have to be ground to at least 10 under. All of the mains are all over the goddamn place, but for the most part, they are ground 20 under. The rear main is actually wore to a taper. It's fatter up against the crank lobe than it is, and then it tapers down once you get towards the flywheel flange. So that's interesting. Hopefully a 30 under grind will take care of it. We'll find out. So we'll have to see if his crank is salvageable, because I don't think you can get... I'm not sure you can get 40 under bearings for this. I'm gonna have to find out, but that's a lot. So the crank we're gonna have to see. The cam, all of the bearing journals on it are wore about a half under, but what we don't know, and that's, again, we'll know more tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm going to clean all this stuff up and get the book out and actually mic it and see where it is compared to factory spec. But don't know if the bearings are on size and they put their oil clearance in the grind on the journals, or vice versa. It's like on a crank, your crank's ground to size and then they put your oil clearance in the bearing. So we got to figure that out. The other issue we're running into here is that head gasket not actually being blown. Number 2 sleeve. Where's that? This is number 2 sleeve, right? That should be number 2. Yeah, it's number 2 piston, so this is number 2 sleeve. Number 2 sleeve has a clean spot right there on the flange. Almost like there was something coming past it, because all the other sleeves are pure carbon all the way around, and that one's got that clean spot. So we don't know if it was pushing coolant past the sleeve. Can't find anything wrong with the block. That sleeve was, when it was in the bore, it had protrusion here, and it was down inside the block here. So either the flange on the sleeve is thinner on one side than on the other, or, well, it would almost have to be, because if the counter bore was cocked at an angle, you would warp the sleeve, because you're on size in the bore in the bottom. So, I don't know, something's going on there. And then the block is actually slightly eroded right here. And then the head gasket right there on that edge. Right there. The fire ring is cracked. And the head gasket's cracked all the way out. And this part of the gasket, the only part of the gasket that stuck to the block was right here. All of this went with the head, so it's not like I twisted the head gasket taking it apart. It all came off with the head. And it's kind of probably hard to tell on the camera, but this fire ring has a flat spot here where it was actually pushing out from the sleeve. This one was doing the same thing. This one was pushing out right here. Mostly due to the fact that all the sleeve protrusions were screwed up. They're all too shallow. So we have issues here. But the only other way for water to get into that cylinder if it was not pushing past the flange on the sleeve, is I got a cracked head, which is going to really piss me off because that's a fresh head. It's been decked, the valve seats have been grinded, the valve protrusion's been set, it's got new valves, new guides, whole 9 yards. That's a fresh head. That's going to piss me off if that head's cracked. So, even though I initially thought we were going to be good to go on the head, I'm probably going to completely tear the head down, disassemble it, and send it in and have him with the block and have him flux it and make sure that there's no cracks in the head just for peace of mind. As much as I didn't want to have to do that because it's a fresh head. But without any honest to God, like you can look right at it and say, oh yeah, that's the problem, smoking gun. Now I just want to make sure that head's sound before we throw this back together and have the same problem again. So, yeah. But anyway, I got to get some of this mess cleaned up and get some stuff rearranged, and tomorrow we will pull the oil pan out, take the block outside, take the crank outside, power wash it all down. I'll probably knock the manifolds off the head. The head I was really hoping we were going to pull that head off and there was going to be a big track mark in the head gasket where it had broke, and we had, oh yeah, there's a problem right there, and it didn't do that. So now I'm just worried about that head. But we clearly had issues with sleeve protrusion and the head gasket sealing around the fire rings and everything as well. So we definitely need to get the sleeve protrusion fixed. Definitely need to get the block decked so it's flat again. So, yeah. And through the process of all this, we were, between miking the crank and what the bearing dimensions are and everything, we're kind of surprised this thing had any oil pressure at all whatsoever, because you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 50, between what's wore on the crank and the size of the bearings and the way everything's matched up, you were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 thousandths of clearance, which is way too much. It was this bearing right here. Let me get a pic so I can show you. The rod bearings were so loose. This is number 6. Number 5, you're wore down to copper. There's no babbitt left. But number 6, you can see there's the part number in the bearing. It beat the part number out of the bearing into the rod journal. So she was slapping pretty good. But anyhow, like I say, I'm gonna get all this power wash tomorrow. We'll pull all the plugs out of the block. Basically get it stripped down to where it's a bare block, and get it ready to go in. I'm gonna have to strip that head down. We're gonna have to kind of be meticulous about that, because if it is good and it comes back and we can put it back together, the valves have to go back in their same holes because they're lapped to match those holes. So, yep, fun. And then naturally, all the shit's got to go down to the barn to get it out of the way for Dad to have a shop. This is why I wish I had a shop. This is why I haven't started working on the 2255. When you don't have a space where you can just tear something apart and leave everything where it lay in an organized fashion so that nothing gets lost, it gets stressful. So, but anyway, I'm going to clean this stuff up and get the floor cleaned up and whatnot. So, I guess that's it for this one, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow when we get some numbers together and figure out what kind of a mess we're really getting into here. So that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.